Welcome to MSUA Game Changers webcast, where we speak with satellite and mobile connectivity thought leaders about industry trends and share what you need to know about the future of mobile satellite communications. I'm your host, Roger Lanto, and I'm excited to introduce Andrew Faiola, Commercial Vice President at Astroscale. Astroscale won the 2025 Mobile Satellite Users Association Space Sustainability Innovation Award for its active debris removal ADRAS-J mission. This award recognizes the mission's innovation in safety approaching and inspecting large, non-cooperative debris in low Earth orbit, a critical step for future on-orbit servicing and space debris removal. The ADRAS-J mission demonstrated advanced technologies such as autonomous proximity operations and real-time communication in a complex, fast-moving environment. Before we dive into Astroscale's space debris removal activities, tell me a little about yourself, Andrew. What is your background and history in this industry sector and at Astroscale?
Thanks, Roger, and really happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me. My background is becoming more and more space, but I've only been at Astroscale myself for almost 3 years. Prior to that, many years in the commercial satellite communications industry, both across a number of satellite operators, ground segment, teleport platforms, etc. So quite a long history from that perspective. But a couple of years back, I had an opportunity to make a bit of a pivot into proper space industry segment of the business. But that segment of the business has a really large knock-on effect to where I came from previously. So quite complementary, but it is a really new space and a big learning curve that I'm really pleased to take on every day of the week.
Well, I have to be honest, my impression is you know everybody and everybody knows you, but who am I? But I do run into you at a lot of industry events, and yeah, you seem to be very firmly ensconced in this industry. So it may be relatively new to you, but it's way newer to me. And anyway, I've been impressed so far. So how vast is the space debris problem, and how is it evolving?
It's an increasing problem for sure. I think what tends to happen is, at least from a layman's perspective, is you look up at the heavens and there's an awful lot of space up there. But the reality is that most of the things that we rely on every day for our normal lives tend to come from a couple of areas in that big part of space up there. And those particular areas are becoming more and more congested. Um, you've got literally tens of thousands of satellites being launched into low Earth orbit over the next 5 years or so, on top of the already 12,000 or so that are there. And if you look at, and those are spacecraft themselves, active spacecraft. That's not including the inactive spacecraft, and then all of the many bits and pieces as you go down further and further in size to the sort of millions of pieces of small sub 1 centimeter pieces of debris. Um, and you'd think, okay, a fleck of paint, I'm not too worried about that. But the reality is that the physics of these things, they are traveling multiple times faster than a speeding bullet. So when something as small as a screw or a fleck of paint were to hit a spacecraft, it can create huge amounts of damage. So we're contending with that. So the sort of the existing environment, but then shoving tens of thousands of more spacecraft into that environment. You also have, on top of that, the fact that you do have inactive objects up there, spacecraft that have failed, rocket bodies, etc. And these don't have the capability to move out of the way. So you either have objects that can do collision avoidance maneuvers, or in some cases, only one can when there's two objects that are on a convergence path, or none, and that is a real problem. Um, I think I just recently saw a statistic that between last year and this year, we've gone from a scenario where collision avoidance maneuvers were taking place on average about one every 5 minutes last year. This year, it's one every 2 minutes. So that is the kind of rapidly evolving pace of change that's happening in the space environment.
Well, thank you for mentioning that. Yes, there's a significant ecosystem that's emerged for maneuvering craft and tracking debris, and which is a whole different value proposition. How did Astroscale decide to take on this challenge in the manner that it did, actually removing debris? And how was Astroscale able to rally support for this project?
Well, our founder and CEO, Nobu Okada, recognized this as a potential problem in our ability to as our ability as humans to successfully, commercially, and securely access space and be able to exploit that for economic benefit. He realized that back before 2013, when the company Astroscale was founded, and that, if you look at sort of the proliferation of companies that have come since, was really quite forward looking at the time. And I think even he will tell you that he was probably looked at with a bit of side eye, and that, what's this guy thinking? It's not an issue. This is like totally weird. Um, but he's been absolutely validated in that view. And as time has gone by, obviously, um, governments, private investors, public investors have seen that this is a challenge that deserves attention, deserves investment, um, and that there is an economic benefit to doing this. So, that sort of rallying of support, largely started at home for him in Japan, but it's rapidly blossomed out from there.
Uh, what organizations are supporting funding Astroscale's efforts?
So Astroscale has been fortunate over the years. We have been funded initially largely by private equity, sort of following the standard path of many technology startups. We had a initial public offering in June of 2024. Um, Once we'd sort of passed through a number of stages of investment, and as we've gone, we've started to win and deliver many of these programs that you're now starting to hear about, and that is obviously sort of funding our path forward. So, institutional and government funding for tackling these challenges. And then, that's going to lead us towards ultimately sort of proper commercialization of the business lines that we're looking at.
And as this kind of capability has become available, how has the industry evolved to explore this, take advantage of it?
I'd say that we're still in a fairly nascent point in the evolution of the in-orbit servicing, assembly, and manufacturing. This is sort of what we call this segment, ISAM. Still relatively nascent, but you're starting to see a rapid development of the technology. Um, Technology is one thing, but demonstrating capability is another thing, and entirely. And that's where you're starting to see us and others at that sort of transition point. Um, what we need to do as well is demonstrate, what does commercialization look like? What does it mean for a commercial um, company that might want to consume these types of services. And this is not only removal services, right? This is also ultimately other kinds of servicing, whether it's life extension, whether it's refueling, whether it's refurbishment. It is also um, it is also things like inspection, right? Where it's no surprise that there is a lot of interest from defense organizations for these types of capabilities for national security, right? In pretty much every case, you could look at the satellites that are up there. They are part of our critical national infrastructure, right? And they need to be looked at like power lines, like any kind of other critical national infrastructure. And how do you maintain it? How do you protect it? How do you decommission it at the end of life? We have to look at it in that same kind of total life cycle way, whereas previously, things going up into space were pretty much looked at like as single-use disposable assets. But there just isn't the real estate in terms of either physical space or radio spectrum to treat things like that anymore.
And what regulatory measures have been put in place to mitigate this problem? And is there any way that Astroscale benefits from those regulatory actions?
The regulatory environment is shifting, I would say, shifting in the right way. There's a growing recognition of, again, of the congestion that is really starting to impact on the space environment. You've seen some small steps in that direction. For example, the 5-year rule that the FCC put into place a couple of years ago, which was a change from the sort of industry standard, which continues to remain the industry standard of a 25-year demisability rule. So you're starting to see small incremental changes at a regulatory level. I think there still needs to be further progress on that side, but you're also seeing of um, quite a lot of best practices and guidelines from influential organizations, whether it's the IADC or UNUSA, the UN Office of Outer Space Affairs, or many others. So there's, let's say, a growing pressure to demonstrate as an operator that you're doing the right things, but we're not yet at the point where the right regulatory incentives are there to um, really sort of push that behavior faster, right? I don't like to talk about penalties. I'd rather that there be like incentives for doing the right thing. But there has to be, you know, in any industry, right? You have to have the right regulatory framework, hopefully a light touch regulatory framework that just nudges the industry in the right direction without impacting the industry's ability to make money, frankly. So, we as Astroscale don't want to be prescriptive about exactly what types of actions or uh, things that operators undertake to achieve certain requirements, but we'd like to see the requirements there, and we can be as Astroscale or other companies in the ISAM area. I think we can be a really really useful tool in the toolbox to being compliant in those things, and that's sort of how we look at it.
And what does your competitive environment look like?
Um, I'm really pleased to say that actually there's really no other commercial company that has done what we've been able to do
Wow.
with non-cooperative clients in orbit. There's others that have been able to dock and extend the life of cooperative clients in orbit, but and that's super important. But I think other than other governments and very few other commercial companies have been able to demonstrate what we've demonstrated in orbit, both in terms of you mentioned ADRAS-J earlier, the inspection mission that Astroscale Japan carried out last year, or the ELSA-D mission that really sort of threw open the doors back in 2021 that Astroscale UK delivered. So from that standpoint, we are doing what we've said we're going to do. I can also say that as much work as you put in on the ground in terms of running simulations, doing the maths, etc., nothing prepares you for getting up there and actually seeing what you encounter, whether it's the particular kind of space weather you might encounter, whether it is little things like anomalies, etc. You really only learn from doing, but we're in an environment where what we do has to not create more debris. So it's a very it's a very tricky line. That's why it's hard, and it takes a while to get there. There are other competitors that we see that we see coming that have very talented people, and will certainly be able to do some of the things that we can in time. But I think we've demonstrated a very rare capability today.
And are you operating at LEO, MEO, and GEO, or where is the focus?
Yeah, so today the focus is really on Leo and Geo. So the missions that you've seen from Astroscale to date have been in Leo. They've been inspection and removal missions. But we're also our Astroscale US team is building a life extension spacecraft for Geo. So that sort of is part of the servicing environment. Um, so that's really the focus today is Leo and Geo. I won't go into the details around things like radiation environments and addressable markets and things like that, but those are the two areas of focus today. Also, really sort of demonstrating the technology is useful to do in Leo, right, at lower altitudes where you're not going to leave debris for any long period of time either. So a lot of, even if we're looking to do things in higher areas of Leo or in MEO in future or in GEO, it often makes a lot of sense to do those in orbit demonstrations at a lower altitude, right, where you're not going to have to um, worry about leaving things in orbit for a long period of time.
Yeah, it's interesting when you talk about servicing orbiting hardware. The only reference point I have would be to remember the Hubble telescope mission when they had to
Yep.
replace the lens. Um, Astroscale introducing this capability, and again, presumably not the only company talking about it longer term. But has this become something of a revelation that this capability is now available?
I would say yes, and you mentioned the Hubble servicing mission. This is this is a mission that's probably cost billions, if not or hundreds of millions of dollars to do, right? So these are quite special types of missions. But I think if you look at for example, things like what is happening in orbit today between adversarial nations in terms of spacecraft uh, getting very close to other spacecraft to inspect or possibly disrupt those activities. The activities of those spacecraft require lots and lots of propellant, lots and lots of fuel to do the things that those spacecraft are doing. It would seem to me to make a lot of sense that if you want to outlast your adversary, it might be a good idea to be able to refuel rather than have to go build and launch another spacecraft to do those kinds of things. So, there's new applications that weren't necessarily even, sort of there back in the Hubble time. But it's how we do those kinds of things, how we do them in a repeatable and economical way, and that's the most important. And it really starts at a foundation of, you know, can you pilot a spacecraft, or in many cases the spacecraft is essentially piloting itself, but can you do that in a way where you can reliably, safely approach and perhaps even dock with another object in orbit without creating debris. This is a much harder challenge than you can imagine, and it is very, very satisfying when I can say that Astroscale has achieved it, because yeah, the being a non-technologist and listening to the challenges that different teams in our organization have overcome to come together in a way to achieve a particular objective, it's extraordinary. I mean, I cannot, I cannot praise enough the teams that we have internally, whether it's the guys and girls that are putting together the spacecraft, the ones that are building the flight dynamics and computer vision algorithms, to the guys that are doing the mechanical design for the thing. I mean, it all has to converge at some point, and every one of those pieces has to work. So yeah, it's something special.
So, what's next for Astroscale?
Yeah, well, we've got quite a lot on our plate. In fact, and I'm really excited for the next few years. Our Japanese team is working on a number of missions around refueling and inspection. There's going to be a follow-on mission behind ADRAS-J to remove that rocket body that we saw all the really incredible pictures of. So that, which is one of the sort of world's top 50 most unlikable objects in space, will ultimately be removed. Our U.S. team is working on a refueler, a refueler servicer, and in the UK, we are working on the bid for the UK National Debris Removal Mission, as well as sort of preparing ourselves for the European Space Agency's upcoming ministerial, where they'll set the budgets for a number of for the whole entire ESA budget for the next 3 years. But we're looking at really sort of widening our portfolio capability from, we talk about sort of end of life services, but we are an in orbit servicing company, right? So it's about really sort of broadening the types of spacecraft that we can service, so both prepared and unprepared, but also clients of different mass sizes as well, right? All of those different variables inject new challenges into into the mix. So um, I'd say, over the next 3 4 years, we have a number of missions on our docket that are really going to um, build on each other. One, which is good. When I say build on each other, it means it should cost us less to do each subsequent mission, because we're taking the learnings from the previous missions, also building on the platforms that we already have designed, but then also expanding the capabilities that we can do with those, and that will help us address different market segments in different ways, right? We talked about the types of needs of the defense establishment, but commercial constellation operators, like I said, I think the regulations are going to tighten over time. Um, and there will also be much more congestion up there over time. So I think it's going to become more necessary to address those kinds of issues. So yeah, we're in a really sort of formative period for Astroscale and for the ISAM industry writ large. A lot needs to still go right across the board for this to for this to be a success, and that's not just down to us at Astroscale for sure, but we're doing our part across that sort of technology into capability, really sort of working on the policy side of things, and then really taking a hard look at like how do we build business cases that work for our customers.
And where can people and potential partners find more information about Astroscale?
Well, they can always come to me, Roger. I think you said everybody knows me. I mean, I'm not sure that's quite true, but I've got a lot of gray hair to prove that I've been around for a while. But obviously, astroscale.com. We actually have a swanky new website, so we want people to go visit that. But you can obviously also find out more about Astroscale on our socials. But we do focus on having members of the team available at important conferences and trade shows as well. I think we're in an era where you can probably find someone in person or online 24/7.
I wanted to ask you about that. Will you be at Silicon Valley Space Week?
I won't be at Silicon Valley Space Week, but I will be at the Secure World Foundation Summit for Sustainable Space in a few weeks, as well as at Space Tech Expo in Bremen. But I'm not the only guy, right? We'll have people out and about. Don't know if we're gonna have anyone at Silicon Valley Space Week, but
Where's that other event taking place you mentioned?
Space Tech Expo is in Bremen in Germany, and the Secure World Foundation Summit for Space Sustainability this year, it moves around. This year it's in Paris.
Okay. Hey, it's a rough life, huh?
Someone's got to do it, Roger.
Absolutely. Thank you, Andrew. So I want to thank the Mobile Satellite Users Association for hosting these sessions. You can learn more about the MSUA at msua.org. You can learn how to get our weekly newsletter that gives you updates on everything that's happening in the industry and shares information about upcoming events. And you can also find out how to become a member. We look forward to seeing you next time on MSUA's Game Changers webcast. Andrew, thanks again.
Thank you very much, Roger, and thanks to MSUA.